Your child might be studying, but the effects don't show up come quiz time. A lot of students spend hours studying, but they still forget the information. They read over their notes, they highlight, they look over the study guide, and they say, I studied for an hour. But then the test comes and their mind goes blank. The real question is not, did they study? The better question is, did the method to study require their brain to actually retrieve the information on its own? Because rereading notes can make information feel familiar, but being familiar with the information is not the same as understanding the information. I can't tell you how many times I have been driving in an area and a road or a turn looked familiar, so I took it thinking that that was the way to go, and I ended up lost. That's the same way with reading over the notes or highlighting. It makes the information seem familiar, but it doesn't actually allow you to use the information or recall it later. By the end of this video, I want you to understand 3 things. First of all, stop allowing your students to just read over their notes and think that it is studying. Secondly, I want you to teach them or show them this video so that they can learn how to start practicing what's called retrieval. And then we are going to sort what our students know from what they still need to practice so that we're not spending time retrieving and reviewing information that they do already understand. So in this video, we're talking about the difference between recognizing information, truly remembering it. So if you're following along with my summer student success series, please make sure you subscribe to this channel. This video is part of the 3S Student Success System series, and today we're focusing on skills, how students actually learn, remember, and use information. Studying is a skill students have to be taught. What blows my mind is how there's so many skills that successful students need to have that schools don't explicitly teach. My passion is to bring that education directly to families and the students that need it. My name is Kylie Larson. I am a success coach for students, and I own a tutoring company called 4011 Learning, and we help students build their confidence, their independence, and practical strategies that serve them in school and in life. Again, this summer, I'm walking through the 3S Student Success System. It includes self-belief, skills, and strategy. Today's video fits under skills because, again, studying is a skill. We tell students to study, but we don't really tell them what that means. And this matters because students that are not being successful, it doesn't mean that they're not trying. It doesn't mean that they're not capable. It doesn't even mean they're not motivated. A lot of times what it means is they're just using study habits that feel productive but don't actually produce results. They don't actually prepare the brain to remember, to explain, or be able to apply information later. When that happens over and over, it can start to affect their self-belief also. A student might think, I studied and I still did badly. I must not be good at this. I'm just not smart in this subject. But the real issue is fixable. They just need a better method. Rereading feels productive, but it actually is tricking the brain. Students are doing something. They are putting forth that effort. They're sitting down, they're looking at the material, they might be highlighting, they might be copying definitions, or maybe they're reviewing slides from a teacher's presentation, or they're flipping through a study guide. From the outside, it all looks like studying. And to be fair, rereading can have a place in studying. When they're first learning something and they have a misunderstanding, rereading is an excellent strategy to use. When they are checking an answer to make sure it's correct, they are going to go back and reread and find evidence. So it's not that rereading is the problem. The problem is that when that is actually the study plan. When the information stays right in front of the student, the brain does not have to do the hard work of pulling it back from memory. And that matters because most school tasks that are graded often require students to just be able to produce the information when their textbook, notes, or study guide are not right there with them. A quiz usually asks them to remember. A test is usually asking them to apply. A writing assignment is asking them to explain. A class discussion asks them to use the ideas. A math problem asks them to solve something without just copying the example from the board. So if the study time is mostly looking over, rereading, and recognizing, the student may not actually be practicing what they are going to need to do later on the assessment. Looking at notes makes students feel ready, but feeling ready is not the same thing as being able to remember. This is why a student can very honestly say to a teacher or a parent, I did study. I promise I studied. They may have spent a good amount of time with the material, but they just didn't study in a way that actually prepared their brain for what it was going to be asked to do. Recognition is not the same as recall. This is one of the most important concepts that I want you to walk away understanding. Recognition sounds like, this looks familiar. I remember seeing this. That answer sounds right. I'll know it when I see it. Recall sounds like, I can explain this without looking. I can answer this question from memory. I can write this information in my own words. I can use this and apply it when I need it. This is a big difference. A student may reread a science definition 5 times and think, yes, I know this. But if you close the notebook and ask them to tell you what the word means or use it in a sentence, the student might then struggle. The struggle's not the bad part. The struggle is information. It's feedback. It shows the difference between recognizing something and being able to recall it. For vocabulary, recognition is looking over the word and definition. Recall is covering the definition and saying it from memory. For history, recognition is rereading the causes of an event. Recall is closing all your notes and textbooks and being able to explain that cause to someone else out loud. For math, it is watching a solved example and thinking to yourself, that makes sense. Recall is being given a similar problem without having a chance to look at each step and being able to solve. For reading, recognition is reading over a paragraph, but recall is pausing and saying, what was the main idea of this? What did I just learn? What mattered most here? And being able to answer that question. So if a student in your life says, I know this, a helpful follow-up would be, great. Can you explain it to me without looking? This is not a gotcha. This is not to embarrass someone. It's not to prove that they're wrong and they really didn't study. Again, it's feedback. It's information. It's a quick check-in. The most simple example of retrieval practice that I can think of is when you have a child and they have a spelling list and they will turn the spelling list over and they will say the spelling out loud from memory. Then they will flip it back over and they will check it. So that at its just like most basic form is retrieval practice, just covering it up and being able to say it again. Flashcards are a great tool for retrieval practice. Those are like your basic examples. One of the biggest mistakes that students will make is spending too much time trying to get the information in their mind and not enough time trying to pull the information back out. Getting the information in the mind is important, of course, because you cannot retrieve it until it is there. But once it is there, most of the time needs to be spent on requiring a student to do something with that information. Remember it, explain it, answer questions about it, put it in their own words, sort it, organize it, apply it, check what they miss, correct their mistakes. The goal of studying is not to stare at information on a page for a long amount of time. The goal is to practice remembering it when the notes, the textbook, and the teacher's presentation are out of sight. This is the shift I want everyone to make. Most students want to do well. They're motivated, they care, and they spend time. But if they've never been taught how to study effectively, they may keep using methods that feel comfortable, but they just don't create that strong learning that sticks. This is especially important for students who are working hard, but they're not seeing results. When that happens repeatedly over and over, it can really start to damage their confidence and their self-belief, how they feel about themselves as a learner. Trying harder is only going to help those students when they know what to try. Retrieval practice means trying to bring information back from your memory. You may also hear it called active recall. This idea is super simple. Instead of immediately looking at the answer, students try to remember first. This might look like some of those examples I gave earlier: flipping the paper over, closing the notebook, covering one side of the vocabulary list so that they can practice the definitions on their own, pausing the video and putting it in their own words, writing down everything that they can remember, explaining it to someone else out loud. All of these are great examples of retrieval practice. And again, the concept is so simple. Stop looking and try to remember. That's it. But simple doesn't always mean that it's easy. Retrieval practice can feel harder than reading over something. And that is one reason students avoid it. Rereading is comfortable. Again, the information is familiar, it's right there, and the amount of friction to be able to do it is very, very low. Retrieval is a lot harder because the brain has to do the work. But that work is what strengthens their memory. That process is what makes remembering and understanding possible. I used to tell my high school students this. They would tell me, I read over my notes, I looked over the study guide, and I would say, listen, people, I am a very good reader. I could take out the manual to my vehicle and I could read you every word beautifully. But that doesn't mean that I can go and fix something on my car today. That requires action. That requires experimentation. That requires reading and doing. So if your child is saying this feels harder than I want it to, you can just tell them that actually is a good sign. In my last video, I talked about the space between not knowing something and knowing something, and how that process of getting there is frustrating. It is challenging, and that actually means you're learning. Your brain is doing the work of remembering when it feels challenging. We don't want students to be frustrated. We don't want them sitting there lost, unsupported, not knowing what to do or why what they're trying to do is not working, but just showing them that a little bit of extra effort will pay off big time. If the goal is remembering later, students have to practice remembering now. There are types of notes that you can take that make retrieval practice and active recall much easier, and I'm sure that is going to be a video that I make in the future teaching how to create those notes and use them. Active recall and retrieval is really what studying should look like. So let's make this practical again. I always tell students to do every step in reverse. So for the vocabulary example, during one study session, I might cover up the words, read the definitions, and try to recall the word. In another study session, I might cover up the definitions and read the words and try to put the definitions in my own words. When a student is studying, say, something in science, a good method of retrieval practice or active recall is to read the steps to a process, then cover it up, try to draw the process out, and then compare the drawing, go back to the information and see what you got correct, what you didn't understand, correct the drawing, and then you can even highlight the parts that you didn't understand so that you know to go back and study those more later. One of my favorite methods is to encourage kids to teach someone else what they are learning. Most of the information that I can recall today that is factual is things that I figured out creative ways of how to teach it decades ago. So why does this matter? Again, this is going to relieve a tremendous amount of frustration of a lot of students. It is going to give them results that they did not even understand were possible. It's so simple, it seems obvious. I always try to remind myself that, human beings are not born knowing all of these things. And just because it came naturally to me, that's probably why I'm a teacher today. It doesn't come naturally to everyone. I hope that I gave you a few examples of how you can use active recall and retrieval practice in just day-to-day studying with a student. There are all sorts of ways to do it, and I will definitely be making more videos about these sorts of things in the future. Before I go, I want to give you a focused 15-minute study block that can actually pay off more than an hour of distracted rereading or looking over the study guide. Here's a simple routine that students can try. 15 minutes. Minute 1. Pick one specific target, not study science, not review math, not look over my study guide. Choose something specific like, I want to remember these 10 vocabulary words. I want to be able to teach this science process to someone else. I want to be able to do any kind of math problem like this math problem on my own. I want to be able to explain the causes of this historical event, or I want to be able to tell and show one grammar rule in my writing. Okay, so you got the target. What is the purpose of this study block? Minutes 2 through 5. Review the material briefly. This is where you are rereading. You are looking over things, are checking out the presentation that the teacher gave or the definitions on the study guide. But this is not the whole study session. This is just the warm-up. Minutes 6 through 10. Close the notes and start retrieving. Write down everything that you can remember. Make up questions and answer them yourselves. Use some flashcards that you made in class earlier that day. Give yourself some practice problems and see how you do. Explain it out loud. Record yourself explaining it. Minutes 11 through 13. Go back to your notes or your information. Compare that to what you just did in your retrieval. Correct any misunderstandings or mistakes. And then reflect. What did I remember correctly? What did I miss? What did I mix up a little bit? What do I need to fix? Minutes 14 and 15. Make a next step list and use 3 categories. I know this, I kind of know this, or I need more practice. Now, the next time you study this material, you can target in on the things where you lack understanding and don't spend more time on the things that you do understand. This is a simple active study block. I usually encourage students to only study for 15 to 20 minutes at a time anyway, so they can repeat this study block over and over during a longer period of time, allowing themselves a little bit of a brain break in between, grabbing some water, taking a few steps, breathing exercises, or stretches. None of this requires any kind of fancy supplies or tools. It doesn't require them to spend hours upon hours. It only requires them to identify their targets and use a method that actually is training their brain for memorization. Now, I could go on to talk a little bit more about the next step to studying, which is applying the information that you have now memorized or learned, but I think that that would make this video too long, and so I will do a follow-up video at some point that will be about applying information and how to do that. All right, guys, I hope that you have found this video helpful. I hope that you are encouraged by the fact that you can actually spend less time studying for something and have a bigger impact. All right, guys, we're not going to spend an hour studying anymore without making progress. We are going to turn to these methods that are brain backed, science researched, and actually going to work. Thanks, everybody. I'll see you next time.